Top U.S. defense officials were on Capitol Hill for a second straight day of hearings on the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. This time, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, Joint Chiefs of Staff Chair General Mark Milley, and the head of U.S. Central Command General Frank McKenzie faced questions from the House Armed Services Committee. Natalie Brand reports.
Top U.S. military leaders were once again grilled over their advice to President Biden that a group of troops should have stayed on the ground in Afghanistan.
Were you of the opinion, in your professional military judgment, that we should have maintained 2,500 troops?
Yeah, my assessment that I read in the opening statement remained consistent.
Once again contradicting the president's statements during an ABC News interview last month.
No one said that to me that I can recall.
But Joint Chiefs Chairman Mark Milley conceded that maintaining a presence beyond August would have imperiled U.S. troops.
I have no doubt that the Taliban would have reinitiated combat operations.
Meanwhile, an internal investigation into the August 29th drone strike that killed 10 civilians is ongoing. House lawmakers have called for the public release of intelligence leading up to it.
Undersecretary of Defense for Policy is engaged in finding the best way to move forward on an appropriate ex gratia payment and whatever other measures may be contemplated in regard to that family.
House members also pressed the military leaders on how they will monitor possible terror threats without a presence on the ground.
And we're looking at their ability to develop a capability to export terror to the homeland here.
The conditions could be set for a reconstitution of al-Qaeda and/or ISIS.
Calling the Afghanistan war a strategic failure, General Milley and fellow witnesses acknowledged they did not foresee the swift fall of the country to the Taliban, which he says has emboldened the radical jihadi movement globally.
And Natalie joins me now with more from Capitol Hill. Hi there, Natalie. So did the Joint Chiefs and Defense Secretary the Joint Chiefs Chair, rather, and the Defense Secretary say anything different at today's House hearing than what they told the Senate yesterday?
Well, Elaine, I can tell you that the House members really tried to pick up where the Senate Armed Services Committee left off yesterday, really pressing these military leaders on, number one, that recommendation made to President Biden and also former President Trump regarding leaving some troops in Afghanistan. That dominated a lot of time today, getting more answers from them on what exactly they told President Biden, and they would not comment on those direct conversations, but again reaffirmed, Milley and McKenzie, that their recommendation was that a small group stay in Afghanistan. McKenzie giving the number 2,500 troops. So that again was reaffirmed today, even though the military leaders note that once that withdrawal decision was made, that leaving U.S. troops in Afghanistan past August, they say, would have imperiled the people there and the U.S. mission. Another key point that the House Armed Services Committee tried to drill down on is the threat in the future and what DOD and intelligence is doing to try to safeguard against future threats coming from Afghanistan now that there is not a military presence on the ground, Elaine.
Well, Reuters is reporting that the Taliban is demanding the U.S. halt the use of drones over Afghanistan. What can you tell us about that?
There's not an official statement at this point in response to that from the Pentagon. That Reuters reporting comes from a tweet from the Taliban, so we'll have to wait and see what the official U.S. response is on that. But it kind of speaks to the thought by the administration and the military leaders in talking about the future monitoring of Afghanistan, or response would be what they call over-the-horizon capabilities, which includes drones and satellite images. And so that was a key discussion discussion point today as some of the members really press the military leaders on what that strategy looks like. And a lot of that information, the military leaders said, would have to be shared in a classified briefing, not a public setting. But Elaine, there was a really interesting exchange between Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan, who's also former CIA, who now sits on the House Armed Services Committee, and she asked Secretary Austin very directly what kind of factors, push factors, if you will, would trigger them to go to the White House and say, we have a problem here. And that's where we did get a response from Secretary Austin in talking about, well, movement of leaders or movement across international boundaries, training camps, different signals that could potentially escalate the situation. So he did detail some of what they're watching as military leaders, especially General Milley, really warn, as you heard him say, that ISIS or Al-Qaeda could reconstitute, giving a timeline of 6 to 36 months, Elaine.
In our final minute, Natalie, a charter plane carrying more than 100 Americans and green card holders evacuated from Afghanistan was turned away from landing in the U.S., instead touching down in Abu Dhabi. What is the latest on that?
Well, we did, Elaine, get a statement, rather, from the State Department, which essentially said they are working to confirm the manifest, who exactly is on that charter plane, and then go through the proper security and screening protocol, which is also in conjunction with the Department of Homeland Security, before that plane is allowed to then enter the United States. They have a very strict procedure that they have to follow, everything from security screening to public health and safety. So that process, they say, is underway, and they did indicate that the plane is now scheduled to perhaps take off tomorrow, Elaine. That would be Thursday.
All right, Natalie Brand reporting on Capitol Hill for us. Natalie, we really appreciate it. Thank you.